all three of those are some of my absolute favourites and I would recommend them all. Shut up, dog. Go away. Hi, I'm Miranda and I'm here today to talk to you about some underrated book recommendations. These are just some pairs of books that I think share similar themes, similar writing styles, or similar general vibe that I think if you like one of them, you will like the other one. And this is not a read this, not that video. It's a read all of these books because they're great. Just if you like this one, I think you will also like this one. The first two I want to talk about, neither of them are particularly popular or well known, but I feel like in certain booktube circles, The Bassrock by Evie Wyld, which was published this year, is really getting a lot of hype. So I wanted to recommend a book that also came out this year, but is less kind of talked about. I mean, I don't think I've seen anyone talk about this. I only came across it because I walked into Foyles, saw it there, was like, oh, that's interesting, I'll pick it up, and it was great. So if you don't know, The Bassrock by Evie Wyld is about kind of three interlinking stories of women and their relationships with men and their violent relationships with men. It explores violence against women and kind of the terrifying nature of masculinity. It's really visceral and beautifully written, and I loved it. It's great. One of my favourite books of this year. A book that I think is very similar to The Bassrock in its themes and the way it's written is no, it's not The Bassrock. It's Real Life by Adeline Dieudonné. This is translated from French by somebody. Why do I always do this? Roald Glacé. So yeah, this also is about violence against women and masculinity, but it focuses on two children. It's narrated from the point of view of a young girl, and there's a kind of traumatic event that she and her younger brother witness, and her younger brother then changes and she starts to become a lot more like their incredibly abusive father. So it kind of follows her trying to protect her brother from the kind of forces of masculinity that are trying to take him away and make him grow up too fast. And like The Bassrock, there are some absolutely terrifying scenes in this. It's very tense. The writing is quite sparse but also incredibly beautiful, and just, yeah, both this and The Bassrock are about abuse against women and are written in really terrifying, visceral ways, and I think they're both excellent. Yeah, so I would highly recommend this. The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter is an absolute classic, kind of reimagining fairy tales collection of short stories. That's not a good sentence. Oh well. Yeah, it's classic, it's great. I absolutely love this book. I think it's brilliant, and creepy and weird and just beautiful. Some of the most beautiful writing ever is in here. So I have two books that are kind of similar to The Bloody Chamber, both in very different ways. They're very different, but I kind of feel like they both have elements of it that I think if you like The Bloody Chamber, you will like these books. So the first one is Where Europe Begins by Yoko Tawada. This whole collection is a kind of, it's made up of really surreal horror short stories. I read this having no fucking idea what was going on most of the time, but I was scared and tense and kind of amazed by the beautiful, weird writing that is in here. These stories are translated by Susan Bonovsky and Yumi Selden from Japanese, and some of them were written in German. This is really difficult to define and it's quite challenging, and I was confused a lot of the time, but I was also intrigued. It's about a lot about, again, masculinity and femininity. It's about appearance. It's about nothing being right or what it should be. It's wild, and I think every time I read it, I will reread this because it definitely deserves that. I'll get something new from it. Christ, this video is going to take a lot of editing, isn't it? Another book that I think is very similar in certain elements to The Bloody Chamber is Kiss Kiss by Roald Dahl. This is, again, one of my all-time favourite books. The stories in here are kind of creepy and unsettling in a very realistic way. They kind of just take a scenario that is quite specific but realistic. Well, not always, actually. There's ones about a guy turning into a bee. Anyway, they're kind of rooted in realism, mostly. These short stories are constructed so expertly. I genuinely think that each one is a tiny work of genius. If you enjoy the kind of creepiness of The Bloody Chamber, I would recommend Roald Dahl's Kiss Kiss. But if you like the weird kind of different style of writing of The Bloody Chamber, and you want more terrifying horror that you won't understand but still kind of unsettles you, Where Europe Begins is where to go. Next, I think if you like The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo, you will also like Purple Hibiscus by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. So The Poet X is a YA coming-of-age story that follows Xiomara, who's from a Dominican immigrant family in the US, and it's about her finding her voice through poetry and also falling in love for the first time and kind of dealing with her difficult family relationships. Her parents are very religious and very strict, and she has a kind of turbulent relationship with them, and it's all about her kind of coming into her own and finding her own voice. It's really beautifully written. A lot is said in very few words because it's written in a series of poems, which I think is really beautiful because it's narrated by Xiomara, and it feels like, or X as she's called, and it feels like you're getting her kind of poetry as she's writing it, which I love. What I think links Purple Hibiscus by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie to The Poet X is the kind of troubled family relationships and the way that religion is a big part of that as well, which I didn't actually realise until just now. I didn't realise that when I was planning this video, but they both have kind of incredibly religious families who are also abusive, and a younger kind of a young female narrator who's trying to break out of that and find herself. I adore Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's writing. She's one of my favourite writers ever, and I think that if you enjoy the themes and the kind of story of The Poet X, I think Purple Hibiscus is an excellent kind of companion to it in lots of ways. They're written very differently, but I think they both kind of capture the sort of feeling of being a young woman and falling in love for the first time, but also finding different relationships that save you from a kind of abusive one. Next up, Everything I Never Told You by Celeste is an incredibly popular kind of contemporary mystery about an Asian American family and a daughter who goes missing. Does she die? I wish I could remember what happens in books. I'm really shit at this. It follows a family after the favourite daughter of the family, Lydia, is found dead in a lake, and essentially you're just kind of discovering more about each person in the family and their relationships together and with different people, and how they kind of feel they fit in to the town that they're living in. What I absolutely love about Celeste Ng's writing is how she just understands characters. Like, there are lines in this that just, it's a sentence and then you understand the essence of a character just from that sentence. I think it's absolutely incredible. I actually prefer her other novel, Little Fires Everywhere, to this one, but they're both still great. The reason I'm talking about Everything I Never Told You is because the themes of family and mystery and grief are also very present in The Lyekeepers Daughters by Jean Pendziwol. So this book, as you might imagine, is about two sisters who live in a lighthouse, but it's mostly about a teenager, Morgan, and her finding a kind of developing a relationship with an older woman in a nursing home and kind of discovering the story of her childhood and what happened to her and her sister. I literally stayed up late at night finishing this book because I wanted to know what happened so much. It's not a kind of like, you know, twisty turny thriller type book, but it's just the way that I got invested in these characters, and the way that you desperately want to find out about all the relationships and what's happened to them, really reminds me of Celesting, and specifically Everything I Never Told You. I love books where you get to know characters really well and you feel like they're kind of a part of you, and this is really one of those. This is a damaged copy that I got when I worked at a bookshop, and I literally haven't seen it anywhere since, like in bookshops, on BookTube, on the internet, literally anywhere. It's not like my favourite book that I've ever read, but I think it is really excellent, and like I said, it made me stay up late reading it, which rarely happens anymore, because I'm old and sad. So, Freshwater by Akwaeke Emezi. I read this in July of this year for the Reading Rush, which I filmed for my first ever YouTube videos, and I thought it was incredible. It's about a person called Ada who has spirits inside of them, and yeah, it's beautifully written. It's about folklore and families and growing up, and all kinds of horrible stuff happens in this book, but it's incredible. What really stands out to me in this book is the kind of challenging, genre-defying, kind of fairy tale-esque writing that is very present in, drumroll please, The Woman Warrior by Maxine Hong Kingston. This is another book I read last year for my university course, and it is technically a memoir, but also it has lots of elements of Chinese folk tales and fairy tales, and it's just incredibly hard to tell what's real and what's not. It's also absolutely beautifully written in a very experimental way that's very similar to Freshwater, and that's what I think, that's what links them together for me. This is a memoir about Maxine Hong Kingston's experiences growing up in America with Chinese immigrant parents, and kind of, it's very much about language and different family relationships, and it's told through fairy tales. It's not like anything else I've ever read. It's completely genre-defying and totally unique, which also is the same for Freshwater. The Trouble with Goats and Sheep by Joanna Cannon is a book that is, to me, very much about Englishness and the kind of little quirks of small communities in England specifically. It's set in a heatwave in the summer of a year in the 1970s that I cannot remember. Two children try and solve a mystery of what's kind of basically what's happening in their street. It's about outsiders, it's about Englishness, it's got fun, memorable characters, and all of that is also true for a book that more people need to read, English Animals by Laura Kay. This book is better, in my opinion, but not nearly as talked about as The Trouble with Goats and Sheep. This book is about Mirka, who moves to England from Slovakia to live in a big country house with a couple to help around with their house, but also help run the taxidermy business. And it's about her relationships with these two people, her place in the kind of wider community, and again, it's about outsiders, it's about weird English quirks. The characters are beautiful and I love them. The relationships between them are all so complicated and nuanced, and beautifully written about. Yeah, this is one of my favourite books. I love it so much. If you like The Trouble with Goats and Sheep, you should definitely read this, but it also has elements of Celesting in that the characters are so well written that you can read one line about them and you'll suddenly know who they are. Especially, I think if you like Little Fires Everywhere as well, you would also really like this. It's great. More people should read it because I love it and it doesn't get enough love. It's got like less than 1,000 ratings on Goodreads. A single tear. Another one of my all-time favourite books. Actually, no, this is two of my all-time favourite books. The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. So, the first time I read this book, I cried. I ugly cried through the last like 3 chapters. And I rarely do that at books. More so now because I'm old. I don't know. I was an emotionless teenager and I am moving into being a very, very emotional 20-year-old. Anyway, it's incredibly popular. Everyone loves it. It's incredible. If you haven't read it, read it. For God's sake, read it. So if you haven't read this, it is a retelling of the Iliad? Maybe. It follows the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus through the Trojan War. Well, you see them growing up together and then their relationship moves to the Trojan War. Bad things happen. It's a cry fest. So if you like, in this book, the historical kind of fantasy element of it, in the sense that, you know, ancient Greece was a place, but there are also gods and shit in this. If you like that, if you also like the angsty gayness of it, the very atmospheric nature of it, and the absolutely beautiful writing that makes you want to curl up in a ball and cry, you will also like The Binding by Bridget Collins. This is a proof. It's very wobbly. This book again holds an incredibly special place in my heart. It's the first proof that I ever read, that I ever got from, again, when I was working at a bookshop, and it's so beautiful. This book feels like it's set in a kind of historical, sort of maybe early 1800s England type setting, for me anyway, but it has a very distinct fantasy element that people's lives can be bound into books, and they will then forget what has been bound into that book. That element of their life will disappear from their memory and it will become a book. So we follow a man, I can't remember his name, a young boy, a young man, adolescent person, words, who becomes an apprentice to a bookbinder, and then he finds a book with his name on it. What? He's been meant to forget something? Oh my god. I don't really want to say any more than that, except for there's lots of gay angst in this. So much gay angst. There's, again, a kind of beautiful, vivid historical setting. What I need to say is, if you like The Song of Achilles, I think you will also love this, because so many elements of which make The Song of Achilles great are also in this book. Okay, we're on to the last pair of books. So My Sister the Serial Killer is a kind of thriller type crime book, but it follows Coretti, who has a sister who's a serial killer, but Coretti feels a very big sense of loyalty towards her. Her sister Ayula is always saying, hey, come clear up my mess, I killed another one of my boyfriends. And for the third time this happens, which is at the beginning of this book, Coretti kind of realises that actually maybe this is a pattern. Her sister always blames it on self-defence. Ayula also starts dating a man who works with Coretti, who Coretti has had a massive crush on forever, and she's like, please don't kill my man. It's about the kind of loyalties of these sisters and what they do for each other. It's very kind of fast-paced and easy to read, but also fascinating with lots of weird characters and cool stuff happening. So I think if you like My Sister the Serial Killer, which a lot of people do, you will also like The Bus on Thursday by Shirley Barrett. This is much more kind of horror than My Sister the Serial Killer. This follows a woman who goes to a remote village to kind of replace their teacher who has gone missing. She's having a mental breakdown in lots of ways. She is, I think she's just recovered from cancer, but she doesn't know what the hell she's doing with her life, and it's kind of about the weird village and the effect that it has on her and her kind of mental state. It's incredibly bizarre, but also very, again, thrilling and fast-paced, and very relatable in some ways, which also is the case for My Sister the Serial Killer. Both of these books, I think, are incredibly dark, incredibly quick to read, but also fundamentally about women having a kind of crisis of their identity and their kind of mental health. They also are both very darkly funny, and I think that if you like the kind of the female protagonist and the kind of dark humour of My Sister the Serial Killer and also the kind of thrilling nature of it, you will also like this. I have no idea if I expressed any of that at all well, but here we are. That's a collection of books that I think if you like one of them, you will like the other one. But also, like I said at the beginning, I love all of these books. I think they're all really great, and I would recommend them all. I hope you enjoyed that and got some kind of, you know, recommendations for books that at least I think are good. And yeah, I will see you soon.